Hello and welcome to Kirby SQL Talk. Today we're going to be talking about SQL Server, high availability, and disaster recovery in Azure. This is going to be an initial overview video, and then we'll have subsequent videos that'll go into more detail. So let's define a few terms. High availability, that's when your application is able to survive a failure in your server. Let's say it's the CPU or RAM or power supply, something goes bad, another server takes over. And the application, people using the application notice nothing. Disaster recovery, that's where you have a complete isolated set of hardware, data, programs, all the binaries you need to run your program are in another location, another geographic location. So in the event of a problem with your primary data center, let's say it burns to the ground, let's say it's on the West Coast, your data center on the East Coast has all the data and servers necessary to keep your business running. In order to do this, we're going to use a couple Microsoft technologies, Windows Server Failover Cluster, and on top of that, we're going to layer a Failover Cluster Instance. Let's look at a picture at how this is going to be deployed. This is our 3 nodes set up in a Windows Server Failover Cluster. On the left side, we have our primary data center. Then we have 2 servers here that serve as our Failover Cluster Instance. This is our HA, highly available component. And then on the right, we use always on availability groups to keep the data in our disaster recovery center up to date. And then we're going to use, I'll show you how to use SIOS Data Keeper. It's software that keeps the 2 disks on your failover cluster in sync. This is different to a SAN-based failover cluster. And in some ways, this is better than a SAN-based failover cluster because you have 2 copies of the data that are kept in sync via a block level replication job that SIOS takes care of for you. So that's what it looks like in a picture. Let's go through a checklist. What would you need to do? We're going to create a virtual network or a VNet. Then we're going to create a virtual machine for a domain controller. We're going to set up the domain controller. We're going to create 3 additional virtual machines for our SQL installations. And we're going to add those VMs to the domain that we created in step 3. Step 6, we're going to add failover clustering to the SQL VMs we created, and that's via the Server Manager application. Then we're going to run the validate configuration wizard, and at the end of that, if everything looks good, we'll be prompted to create the cluster. Step 8, we're going to allocate storage. 9, we'll show you how to set up the SIOS Data Keeper software to set up a job to keep the disks in sync. Step 10, we're going to install SQL, a cluster installation, and then a standalone installation in our DR center. And then finally, we'll set up an availability group to keep the DR instance in sync. So what does this look like in Azure? So I'm going to move over to Azure here. And so what we have here is the 3 nodes that we talked about right here that are part of our Windows Server Failover Cluster. And then within that, you have the 2 nodes that are set up as part of your Failover Cluster Instance. And then they'll use availability groups to keep the data in sync with our DR node on the right here. So that's what that looks like. So thanks for watching, and I look forward to talking to you next time when we go into more detail on how to set this up.